When oil money gave women in a forgotten corner of South America financial independence overnight, they stopped waiting to be chosen and started rewriting the rules. This is Guyana, not Ghana, not near Africa, where gender roles are crumbling faster than in most Western capitals. A country no one expected to lead a sexual revolution, now doing just that, not through ideology, but economics. While the world still sees it as just another struggling nation, Guyana is the fastest-growing economy on Earth, where Hindu temples, mosques, and churches share the same block, where indigenous villages run million-dollar eco-lodges Harvard now studies, and where Dutch engineering still keeps an entire capital from sinking below the sea. But what no one's talking about is this. Oil didn't just change the economy. It changed relationships, families, power. And what's happening here now will decide what kind of country Guyana becomes, and whether it can transform without losing itself. Here are 15 truths you were never told about this country. Number 1. The oil boom gender revolution. In Georgetown today, the tension is invisible, but unmistakable. It hums beneath the bass lines of passing minibuses, lingers in office corridors, and flickers in the eyes of couples sitting silently across from each other in fast food joints. A quiet negotiation is underway about power, about pride, and about who gets to decide what a relationship should look like when the balance of wealth begins to shift. Because here's what's actually happening. Oil didn't just change Guyana's economy. It disrupted its gender hierarchy. Practically overnight, more women entered the workforce than ever before. Not in the symbolic, slow-moving way policies usually promise, but in real numbers, with real money and real independence. Government jobs, corporate positions, service industries tied to the energy sector. Suddenly, opportunities that once belonged exclusively to men were being filled by women with degrees, ambition, and choices. That last part, choices, is what changed everything. For generations, a man's role in Guyanese society was measured by how well he could provide. Machismo wasn't just a cultural relic, it was a currency. Now that currency is losing value fast. In parts of Georgetown, it's not unusual to see women buying their own cars, financing their own homes, or turning down marriage proposals that once would have been milestones. And it's not just economic. It's emotional, social, intimate. What happens when a woman no longer needs a partner to survive, but chooses one based on mutual respect? What happens when the expectation that she'll cook, clean, and remain silent in public suddenly becomes optional? The answers aren't theoretical. They're unfolding in real time, in homes and hair salons and WhatsApp group chats across the country. And it's not just women evolving. Men, too, are being forced to redefine what it means to be respected, to be wanted, to be useful. Some are adapting, learning to co-parent, cook, support without controlling. Others feel cornered, unsure how to operate in a world where their authority no longer feels automatic. Nowhere is this more visible than in the dating scene, a place once shaped by tradition and assumption, now fractured by expectation and independence. Relationships are shorter, more transactional, more emotionally charged. Women are saying no, and more importantly, they're being heard. But this isn't a neat transformation. In the same neighborhoods where gender norms are unraveling, you'll still find men who believe their status entitles them to control, and women torn between the comfort of familiar roles and the thrill of new autonomy. It's not a revolution with banners and slogans. It's a daily recalibration, a subtle, continuous shift in the atmosphere. And the deeper question remains, if oil gave women economic power, what does that mean for the culture built on the opposite? The answer might lie in another paradox entirely, one where the very resource fueling this transformation also threatens the values that made it possible in the first place. because just beneath the ground that lifted Guyana to global attention is a contradiction waiting to surface. Number 2. The carbon sink paradox. Guyana is one of only 4 countries on the planet that absorbs more carbon than it emits. That alone would be impressive for any nation, but it's extraordinary for one that's also sitting on billions of dollars worth of oil reserves. While most countries are scrambling to reduce their emissions, Guyana could stop trying tomorrow and still come out ahead, at least on paper. That paper, though, is complicated. 80% of the country is covered in pristine rainforest, untouched, intact, absorbing carbon like a giant green sponge. From the air, it looks endless. No highways, no high-rises, just dense canopy broken only by rivers that curl like ink across a map. It's one of the last places on Earth where ecosystems still function as they were meant to, without interference. That alone makes Guyana a kind of global environmental vault, guarding biodiversity, regulating climate, protecting watersheds. And yet just off the coast, deep beneath the Atlantic, is the very thing that threatens to unravel all of that: oil. In 2015, ExxonMobil struck black gold, and everything changed. Today, offshore rigs pump millions of barrels a year, transforming Guyana's economy, politics, and future at a speed no one was prepared for. And this is where the paradox gets personal. In Georgetown, locals now gather in rum shops to argue a question that's becoming harder to ignore. If your country is a carbon sink, but your economy runs on fossil fuels, are you a hero or a hypocrite? It's a genuine dilemma, not one of abstraction, but of identity. Environmental groups praise Guyana for preserving its forests. Energy companies praise it for expanding oil production. And politicians, well, they're walking a tightrope between both, selling carbon credits to the global north with one hand and signing new drilling contracts with the other. It's created a kind of moral dissonance, because the country can no longer play the underdog. It's being held up as both model and cautionary tale at the same time. For some, the oil boom is a rightful reward after decades of underdevelopment. For others, it feels like a deal with consequences no one fully understands yet. The twist? Guyana's carbon-negative status might actually buy at the very thing other countries no longer have: time. Time to build infrastructure, to modernize, to invest in education and health, without cutting down the forest that sustains it all. But that time is limited, because the same oil that's building hospitals is also heating the planet. And sooner or later, that contradiction will come knocking. It already is, quietly, and in unexpected ways. Like when villagers in remote regions report warmer nights and lower crop yields. Or when the tide pushes just a little further over the sea wall during high season. These aren't warnings shouted from podiums. They're felt in daily life, in ways that can't be dismissed or delayed. So the question is no longer just about conservation or extraction. It's about whether a country that's been defined by its untouched nature can survive what happens when that nature becomes collateral in its own development story. And strangely enough, the answer might be found in a legacy that has nothing to do with forests or fossil fuels. It's written in the old canals, in the rusted hinges of sluice gates built by Dutch engineers centuries ago, still holding the water back, at least for now. Number 3. The Cooperative Republic Experiment. Drive through Guyana's hinterlands, and you'll pass signs that don't make sense anywhere else in South America. Cooperative Society of Maracaibo. Community-owned lodge. Collective farm, no trespassing. These aren't relics of a failed socialist dream. They're living fragments of a political experiment that most of the world forgot, but Guyana never let go. Back in 1970, Guyana did something no one else on the continent dared. It officially declared itself a cooperative republic, not a socialist state. not a capitalist one. Something in between, and completely its own. The vision? That workers would own the farms, villagers would run the hotels, and land would be controlled by the people who lived on it, not by foreign investors, absentee landlords, or multinational giants. On paper, it sounded utopian. In practice, messy. Some co-ops collapsed under corruption or mismanagement. Others thrived, and still do. Take Surma, a remote indigenous village deep in the rainforest that now operates one of the country's most successful eco-lodges, entirely community-owned. Profits are pooled, decisions are made by consensus, and every child in the village knows they're growing up in a place where their family has a stake in the future. Then there's the old sugar estates, once symbols of colonial exploitation. Today, some are run by the descendants of indentured workers and freed slaves, transformed into self-sufficient farming collectives that produce not just cane, but cassava, peppers, citrus, and hope. This isn't romantic nostalgia. It's a strange, ambitious middle path. A kind of capitalism with a conscience, or socialism that actually lets people choose. So does it work? Depends who you ask. But in a world that's either sprinting toward unchecked profit or collapsing into institutional gridlock, Guyana's cooperative pockets offer something rare. Communities still trying to build an economy that serves the people first. And the most surprising part? This isn't just happening in rural outposts. The same spirit is trickling into the cities, reshaping how Guyanese think about business, ownership, and power. Because once a country decides the people should own the land, what else might they reclaim next? Number 4. The Six Peoples Integration. In Guyana, unity doesn't come from blending in, it comes from standing out together. Walk down a single street in Burbus, and you'll pass a Hindu temple draped in marigolds, a mosque with its call to prayer rising at dusk, and a Catholic church hosting a gospel choir rehearsal, all within the same block. Nobody blinks. It's not a tourist setup. It's Tuesday. Here, 6 distinct ancestral roots, Amerindian, African, East Indian, Portuguese, European, and Chinese, didn't dissolve into one another. They remained intact. But instead of fusing into some vague national identity, they found rhythm in their differences. Not tolerance, participation. During Fagwa, Afro-Guyanese teenagers throw colored powder alongside Indo-Guyanese elders in fields slick with dye and laughter. At Mashramani, the Portuguese-descended families who run bakeries downtown blast chutney music while dancing in carnival bands. No one's pretending they're the same. They're just in it together. It's often called the most successful multi-ethnic society in the Western Hemisphere, and not because they erased culture, but because they stacked it like layers in a roti wrap. Soft, complex, sometimes flaky, always better together. But that's only one side of the story. When elections come around, the lines harden. Political parties still mirror the ethnic divides from colonial times. Afro-Guyanese leaning to one, Indo-Guyanese to another. Old mistrust resurfaces, as if unity takes the day shift but division clocks in at night. So how do they dance side by side at Diwali but vote worlds apart? How do generations that shared classrooms still argue from opposite sides of a ballot? The answer isn't simple, but it lies somewhere in the spaces between drums and ballots, between festivals and parliament debates. Guyana didn't erase difference to achieve peace. It negotiated with it, daily, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes beautifully. And maybe that's what makes it all work. Not a melting pot, but a pressure cooker, with the lid half open. Yet for all its cultural balancing acts, there's one number that unites Guyana more than any ethnic label. Number 5. The Jonestown Shadow and Recovery. It's the story Guyana never volunteered to tell, but can't quite walk away from. For most of the world, Jonestown isn't a place. It's a headline, a horror, a word soaked in the unthinkable. 909 people dead in the middle of the jungle, most of them Americans. And to this day, it's the single largest loss of civilian life in U.S. history outside 9/11. But here's what rarely gets asked. What about the place it happened? The people it happened to? The truth is, the jungle never wanted them. The land didn't ask for barbed wire, for loudspeakers, for foreign flags and apocalyptic sermons. Jim Jones came to Guyana because it was remote, under-resourced, and, by American standards, invisible. And when the world looked up in 1978, they didn't see a sovereign nation. They saw a crime scene. Overnight, Guyana became shorthand for madness. A country defined not by its rivers or rice fields or coastlines, but by someone else's nightmare. And yet life kept going. Villages still woke to roosters and motorcycles. Children still played cricket in the dirt. The country didn't collapse, it recoiled. Quietly. For years, Jonestown wasn't spoken of. It wasn't dissected or memorialized. It was buried. And that silence? It wasn't forgetfulness. It was exhaustion. Because imagine being haunted by something you didn't cause. Imagine the world confusing your identity with someone else's tragedy, and then refusing to ask what came next. But what did come next was resilience. Guyana didn't try to rebrand Jonestown. It didn't slap on an entry fee and call it dark tourism. Instead, it rebuilt on its own terms. It welcomed back the world slowly, this time as a country, not a cautionary tale. Today, the site is overgrown. The jungle took it back. And locals will tell you, if they tell you anything at all, that some ghosts don't need monuments. What they do need is space. For silence. For reflection. For the rest of the story. And the rest of the story is happening everywhere else. On the streets of New Amsterdam. In the music of Lethem. In the new oil contracts signed in glass buildings where people once feared only jungle. But the question lingers. How do you reclaim your identity when the world only remembers your worst moment? That brings us to a place where identity isn't about one moment at all, but 1,000 voices coexisting. A fragile harmony built not on forgetting, but on living fully despite the weight of memory. Number 6. The interior versus coast divide. It's easy to think you've seen Guyana if you've seen Georgetown. But that's like judging the Amazon by the size of your backyard pool. 90% of the population lives along a fragile coastal strip, a stretch of land that shouldn't even exist, technically. It's below sea level, held back by Dutch-built seawalls and canals dug centuries ago. Georgetown itself feels like a colonial afterthought trying to modernize and fast forward. You'll pass faded wooden mansions built by sugar fortunes, just blocks from Chinese-funded construction sites, throwing up glass towers faster than anyone can track. It's hectic, humid, and humming with contradictions. But drive a few hours inland, or take a puddle jumper flight if you want to skip the craters masquerading as roads. And it stops feeling like the same country. Because it's not. The interior is Guyana's real body. Untouched rainforest, winding rivers, Amerindian villages, and land so vast it could fit nations inside. The air changes. The noise drops. The phones stop working. Suddenly, you're not in the oil-powered hustle of the coast. You're in the silence of trees that have stood longer than any government here. And this is where the divide gets personal. The coast thinks in cash. The interior thinks in kin. On the coast, your worth is your Wi-Fi speed, your salary, your car. In the interior, it's your role in the village, your respect for the land, your ability to live without needing more. One lives under constant threat from rising tides. The other lives with too much forest and too little attention. And neither side truly understands the other. The government says it wants to develop the interior. Translation: pull the interior into the orbit of Georgetown. Pave it, police it, profit from it. But people out here aren't just scenery. They're not waiting to be saved. They're already living something valuable. The question is whether the rest of Guyana is willing to learn from it before bulldozing past. So when you hear about Guyana's growth, ask, which Guyana? The one staring at the sea, or the one listening to the river? And speaking of rivers, there's one more story they carry that most visitors miss entirely. Number 7. The vaquero culture of the Rupununi. You don't expect to find cowboys in Guyana, and certainly not in the middle of a grassland that looks like it was torn straight out of East Africa. But deep in the Rupununi, where the rainforest thins and the mountains stand watch over endless savanna, there's a way of life that hasn't bowed to time, tourism, or trend. Here, the horses aren't pampered show ponies. They're lean, scarred, and fast. They're tools, not pets. And the men who ride them? They're not just cowboys. They're vaqueros, a word borrowed, transformed, and made entirely their own. These are descendants of African slaves who ran from the coast and found freedom in the open interior. They married into indigenous tribes, Makushi, Wapishana, Wai, and over generations, built a ranching culture that doesn't owe its roots to the Wild West, but to resistance. The Rupununi vaqueros don't wear oversized hats or spin lassos for fun. They wake before dawn, ride for days across cattle ranges the size of small countries, and settle disputes without ever dialing the police. Their language is a blend: English with a Wapishana accent, Portuguese from the borderlands of Brazil, and indigenous words that describe things no outsider vocabulary ever could. It's not just the language that's mixed. The music echoes Portuguese folk songs. The food pulls in cassava, beef, and bush peppers that numb your lips before you can complain. The rules of the land aren't written, but everyone knows them. Hospitality is sacred. Gossip travels faster than horses. And the line between survival and ceremony is often blurred. But even here, even in a world where horseback weddings still happen and children learn to ride before they can read, change is coming. Phones have arrived. TikTok too. And with them, questions that go beyond cattle and land. What does it mean to be a vaquero today, when the younger generation dreams in hashtags and doesn't always return from Georgetown? Still, some hold the line. They rope calves, mend fences with vines, and treat every stretch of land like it remembers the stories their ancestors left behind. It's not a museum. It's not a reenactment. It's a living culture on the edge of two frontiers, between Brazil and Guyana, past and future. And just when you think it's all fading, you see a boy, barefoot, standing beside a horse twice his size, eyes locked with the horizon. And you wonder, maybe he won't leave. Maybe this isn't just the past. Maybe it's a different kind of future. One that doesn't need saving, just understanding. Because the story of Guyana isn't written in just one place. And if you follow the hoof prints far enough into the savannah, you start to realize the capital doesn't always speak for the country. And sometimes freedom lives where the maps fade.